Sair da escola já com uma formação profissional no currículo? Parece bom demais pra ser verdade, né? Pois é. No ensino técnico do Senac, isso é possível. É ensino médio junto com formação técnica, que acontece durante os 3 anos. Lá, eles usam metodologia para projetos, desenvolvendo competências como resolução de problemas, pensamento crítico e colaboração, além de valores éticos e sustentáveis. Quer saber? Senac. Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino médio e saiba mais.
Everyone, welcome back to the social media derby. Thank God the international break is over, the final one of 2024, and I don't think we have another one until March, so thank the Lord for that. We'll be straight club football from now until March. But before we get into the episode, for those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop your comments down below, share the video with your friends, anyone that you think might be interested. It all helps with the algorithms. And for those listening on Spotify, Apple, or any of the other podcasting platforms, please follow, give us a 5-star review or any review. That also helps get the podcast out to more people on those audio platforms. Jonts, how you doing, mate? Feels like a little minute. Man's back in the UK. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, mate. I'm doing all right. As you can see behind me, it's a bit of a mess right now. Just moved into a new place, so trying to get my stuff all set back up again and maybe have like a little Arsenal mural behind me. But yeah, for now it's just moving boxes and curtains, ugly curtains.
Yeah, tell me about it. You can see I'm also going through some home renovations in my house as well. So it's looks a bit like a storage unit, but we move. This week's episode is probably going to be a bit of a shorter one. We're not really going to delve into the international stuff. Nation League's finished. England finished top. Back into Group A or whatever the rubbish it's called. And there's not too much to talk about. Lee Carsley last few games, preparing for Thomas Tuchel. So we'll get straight into the previews for the Premier League games coming up this weekend. We've got Arsenal versus Nottingham Forest on Saturday, 3 p.m. And then Manchester United travelling to Ipswich Town for Ruben Amorim's first game of his reign on Sunday at 4:30. So we'll start off with the Arsenal game. Obviously, you guys have been struggling a bit for form. I don't think you've won a Premier League game in 4 or 5 or something like that. A couple of defeats, a couple of draws. Last time out, 1-1 draw at Stamford Bridge with Chelsea. How are you feeling generally, Jonts? Have you kind of got your groove back, kind of recovered a bit? Because it was a bit of doom and gloom, wasn't it, for the Arsenal fans over the last month or so? So how are you feeling now with the international break come and gone? Do you feel any better about the team?
I mean, I don't feel any better, but I do feel just happy that we haven't had like any further injuries through the international break, because it's really the international break that has appeared to screw us for injuries this season so far. So it's just nice to come out of the back of that with no like major injuries to any of our players. Obviously with Saka and a lot of the other England players kind of pulling out, there was never going to be any doubt about Saka's fitness, hopefully. But, all of our other players that are going away for the international break, there's always a bit of a worry. So, it's also been nice, I think, for the Arsenal fans, at least speaking for myself, to not have to think about it as much over the last couple of weeks. It's been doom and gloom for the last 4 or 5 weeks before that, as you kind of mentioned. And obviously as a result, you can get kind of down on yourself and you can build up some negative momentum. So it's just been nice to not have to think about it. But obviously now coming back, we've got a pretty difficult game in Nottingham Forest, who, I said it at the beginning of the season, don't concede goals, man. And really hard to break down and have a pretty exciting attack. So it's going to be a difficult game, but, I'm still hopeful that this little break, I'm hoping like one of them trips. Do you remember when Arteta took our team on a trip? I think it was in the January break. He took us to like Dubai, took our team to like Dubai or whatever it was. And we came back really refreshed and looked good. So I haven't heard any rumours of us going on trips, but I'm just hoping that getting everyone back to the training ground just regrouping, letting people get some rest, maybe has been enough to kind of refresh the team.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, but I am going to be the bearer of bad news because there were a couple of injury reports coming out after this international break. First, it was Ben White, right? The revelation that Ben White has been playing injured for the last
Yeah, but I mean that wasn't
couple of
caused
months
by
or whatever.
that wasn't caused by internationals, right? That was just something that came out
No,
just
but
before the internationals
Trossard
actually
was,
started, right?
and yeah, but Trossard was, and
Trossard, I don't
and
mind
there's
though.
rumors that
Trossard, I don't mind.
Man's just ignoring
What
certain injuries.
I'm talking is Odegaard, Saka, Saliba,
Yeah, yeah,
Gabriel,
your main
right?
big dog.
Rice.
Yeah, yeah.
None of
Those
you
guys
lot
are
get
all
injured. I'm cool. But if I'm seeing Trossard get injured, he's been stinking it up recently anyway.
fine. Yeah,
But I'm not happy that he's injured, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like
Yeah, yeah, of course.
it's not one of our core like spine of the team, let's say, in my opinion.
Yeah, it shouldn't put you in at a major deficit because he's not one of your necessarily like top 5 key players. You've seen in the last month or so when Odegaard's been out, Trossard has kind of been the main person who's benefited from that injury, and he didn't really take his chance with both hands. So you've got Odegaard back. Trossard, it doesn't look like a major injury from what the reports are saying. It looks like it's something minor, and he'll only be out for a few weeks. But it's still, a couple of spots in that starting 11 that you've been playing over the last few weeks that you've got to replace. Obviously, Ben White. What's your take on that Ben White one? Because I've seen a few Arsenal fans quite upset with this news because it kind of feels like you've been playing him while he's been injured, and there's that whole your medical departments. We talked about it before, right? Like they catch a lot of flack when you get a spate of injuries, and this one it seems or sounds like he's kind of been a bit mismanaged. What do you make of the Ben White injury as a whole?
No, he hasn't been mismanaged. That's bollocks. It's very clear that we've had a lot of injuries to our backline in terms of the people that should be playing instead of him, right, to give him a rest. So people like Tomiyasu, I love him, but he can't stay fit to save his life. Timber was obviously out for a large part of last season. Zinchenko absolutely stinks. We let go of some subpar right backs, left backs. In Tierney and I've forgotten the other guy's name, but the one that got hooked at half time or subbed on and then subbed back off again. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's mismanagement. I think it's risky, right? And I think it does end up sometimes in this situation. But I think if the alternative was that we would have to play, youth players or somebody else in those places instead of Ben White, who ended up being one of our best defenders last season. And as much as people want to try and call him out this season, our defense in general has not been great, right? And it hasn't been his fault that we haven't been great. So I think it's easy to just kind of get down on ourselves based off of the run of games that we've had and say, oh no, everything's falling apart. We're mismanaging players. We've just lost Edu. We're absolutely crap right now. It's just classic bloody melodramatic fan reaction to a slight down period. So I think it's rich to call it mismanagement. I think, we've, last season, the season before that, we barely had any injuries really to our core 11. Outside of maybe Saliba and some of his back problems, but they're then nothing really to do with the medical department. So now when we do get a couple of injuries, people like Man United fans, Liverpool fans, Man City fans, they cry about injuries all the time and they say Arsenal have never had it, tough. Now we have a couple of injuries out and everyone wants to say that our medical department stinks. It's stupid, right? He had minor surgery. He needed it. He's been one of our most durable players. He's also one of the players that gets stuck in the most out of all of the players in our team. And it's bound to happen at some point in the future, right? He hasn't got, an ACL, MCL, some like life-ending, career-ending, season-ending injury. He's had surgery because we've been playing him too much. We've got people like, Lewis Skelly and some other young people trying to come into the team. If this is the time where we just said we couldn't, we can't keep playing him, he needs to go and have the surgery, then fair play. He needs to go and have the surgery. I don't think it's mismanagement. I think that's a bit of a reach.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't really heard any rival fans talk about that with Ben White. It's kind of been some of the Arsenal content creators that have been a bit
Of
frustrated
course it
with
is.
the news, but I think that's just
As I said,
I think that's
melodramatic
just
twats.
yeah, I think that's definitely heavily influenced by the recent run of results. Like if you guys have been winning, or if things weren't as doom and gloom as they've been painted to be in the last month, I think people will kind of just accept. He's a major part of your team, but your defense is probably the most stacked area of your team. So while Tomiyasu's perennially injured, and I agree, man's got to show up some point, right? He's got to get over things. You've got quite a decent amount of cover. So if it means he's got to sit on the sidelines for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it is, and get better, and you solve the problem instead of having him in and out, then I think that's the right call. So I think it's it is like you say, people just will jump from one to the other depending on kind of what the current narrative is. But yeah, I think White's definitely a bigger miss than Trossard, because I think Odegaard coming back in, I think most Arsenal fans and most objective football fans would pick Odegaard over Trossard, right, as a player. And as a person and a player with the impact on your team, you saw him against Chelsea. Automatically, you guys played a lot better with Odegaard in there than you had been with Trossard in there. So let's see how your team lines up. Who do you expect to replace them in the lineup? Do you expect Odegaard to come straight in for Trossard, and who do you think will take White's spot at right back?
I imagine that Timber will come in at right back. Calafiori, it looks like he's fit again, so he'll probably come in at left back. And then, I expect to see a Rice, Partey, Odegaard, like central midfield, let's say. And then, Saka, Havertz, Martinelli. So I don't think there's going to be some major challenge to overcome. I think that's a pretty strong 11.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would argue, some people, White and Timber's probably the only contentious swap out you might have to your strongest starting 11, right? With those replacements. So in theory,
White to Timber?
these injuries. Yeah, I meant like.
Right based off of like last year's form, White to Timber would be the one that you'd question, because obviously White was on absolute fire. Yeah. But Timber's been good. Yeah. I've been very impressed by Timber. He just needs to stay fit. That's my main worry about him.
Yeah, I think the only downside to Timber that I think has kind of been found out in the last couple of weeks is he's really good defensively. He's really good on the ball. He hasn't quite worked out or hasn't been given the license to overlap and stuff. So when you see him at left back, I guess I think that's kind of natural. You don't get the same as Calafiori, right? When Calafiori plays left back, for those handful of games, he was bombing forward, man. I was loving it. As a neutral fan, when you were taking on City, I thought he was great. There were a couple of other games where he was really giving, whether it was Martinelli or Trossard, that a lot of support that you've kind of associated with White and Saka on the other side. So you'll see now, maybe Timber on the right-hand side being a right footer will offer that when he's at left.
But I think you also have to remember that Timber was also naturally more of a central player anyway, right? Like he can play in many different positions, but he's able to play in a DM position, a centre-back position, and he can basically play on either flank. And I think we've tried to play him more before as like an inverted fullback, right? Because he's good on the ball, kind of in that Zinchenko-ish kind of way. He's probably not as good on the ball as Zinchenko in terms of creativity, but he's good enough to kind of get away with that position. But as you say, I don't know if he's as confident or as comfortable or as used to playing out on the wide, the wide flanks and, overlapping and so on and so forth. So that will be interesting to see. But obviously, like this season, we've also played like Partey at right back as well. I don't know if we necessarily want to have two bombing right and left backs. I don't know if we necessarily want both. We sometimes want, in possession, maybe to play with three at the back and have one of the either left or right back kind of go up a bit. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily in Arteta's plans to be playing kind of Klopp type football where he's got right back, left back, bombing down the wings. And as a result, you can sometimes see the effect on either Saka or Martinelli, depending on which one goes forward. So it's evolved. The way that we play football's evolved, right? In 22-23, I think we did play a lot more like that, right? And Saka and Martinelli, I think, both benefited from it. And then last year, you saw Saka benefited more from White having, that kind of license. But you saw Martinelli kind of suffer because he didn't have kind of that Xhaka support on the left-hand side to help him out. So I think it really depends on how we want to play, but it doesn't seem like we're happy to play with two bombing right and left backs. It doesn't make sense to me even why, though, if we've got Partey that can kind of sit in front of the centre backs. I just think it's maybe Arteta's style. He doesn't necessarily want to play with that way, but it does negatively affect our wingers, I guess, depending on who starts.
Yeah, I agree. It affects the one that doesn't have that overlap for sure. Which last season was more likely Martinelli. But yeah, I mean, you can make some tweaks. Obviously, you could drop Partey back into defence when you don't have the ball or you lose the ball to make up the three if you've got the two bombing wing backs or full backs overlapping. But obviously Arteta's been going for more of the one fullback overlap, one kind of invert to make up the numbers, which City have been doing for ages as well. So I get it. It's what you've been doing for the.
To add to that too, I think when Odegaard is back, he tends to hang around Saka more, if that makes sense. He hangs out on that right hand side, does the little cutting in, tries to do the little cutbacks, where he runs one way and then tries to do kind of a little right angle pass back into Saka, who's kind of going back behind the left back. So as a result, I think maybe because the big problem that we've got is that if Saka's left alone and he doesn't have White like bombing down the right hand side, he just gets double teamed, right? And everyone was crying about Cucurella's performance last time. I think he was good, but he also had double, triple teams on Saka at almost all times, right? And as a result, Saka he can't deal with three defenders at the same time. And if he doesn't have somebody bombing down the right-hand side to kind of take one of those defenders away, it limits his options. Whereas when Odegaard is back, he didn't necessarily do it in that Chelsea game, but in a lot of games before, and I've seen some Arsenal fans actually complain about this, he does tend to hang around a lot more on Saka's side. And to the point where some Arsenal fans, like No New Thing and all these guys on Twitter kind of complain about Odegaard stifling Saka's space. So maybe that's another thing. Like if Calafiori is going to go out and provide an option for Martinelli to distract, some of the defenders, maybe Odegaard's going to hang around on that right-hand side and try and do the same thing for Saka, and then have Timber, the back three kind of stay in the way they are. So that's just me theorizing. I'm not going to act like I'm some sort of tactico, but that could be another reason why we don't want to play, I guess, two right and left backs going up too much.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that too. I think that it's a double-edged sword though, because I understand there might be moments where Odegaard might be seen to stifle Saka when he does drift out on that right-hand side a lot. But I think some of your best players come when that little triangle of Saka, White, and Odegaard has been on that side, with White overlapping and Odegaard playing little intricate balls between the three of them. So I can only see a benefit of that, and I think mirroring it on the left-hand side could also work with a Rice, Martinelli, and a Calafiori. But then you would need to have probably a bit more of a mobile DM to do that, and probably Partey's not at that stage right now, being the age and kind of physical state he's in right now. So maybe that's a future development if you were to get like a more of a Rodri type kind of all-out one-man DM, which there aren't many of these days. If you could find someone that could cover the yards, maybe you could do that. But I agree, you'll need to. I doubt Arteta will go for two overlapping fullbacks. He'll definitely try and find a bit more balance to make sure you don't, leave yourself too open. But it should be interesting.
And I think that was his intention. Well, I was just going to say that I think that was his intention with purchasing Merino, though. I feel like he wasn't trying to go for Partey long term, and he seems to like Rice in that sixth position. So I thought he was trying to go for Rice and then having Merino in front with Odegaard in the 10. And I'm looking at a heat map of Odegaard from last season. Like he spent almost all of his time right next to Saka. So I imagine that was what Arteta's intention was this season with Merino. But I don't know if Merino's necessarily bedded in as quickly as he should. Big shocker there. And also Partey's played really well. Like, on the pitch only. I'm not going to talk anything about off the pitch because it's quite clearly my man's got some real big problems, and I don't know what Arsenal are doing at this point, but try and keep my man around. But on the pitch specifically, he has been good this season. So maybe that's kind of thrown a bit of a spanner into the works too. But to answer your other question on how do I think the game's going to go, I see it being cagey, man. I think Nottingham Forest are not an easy team to break down. They've got what it looks like a really nice kind of centre-back pairing right now. I'm really liking this, was it Milinkovic, Murillo kind of pairing. And then you've got Ola Aina, who looks really good. They got Moreno, what they got him from Villa. Is it from Villa that they got Alex Moreno, right? They look really nice. Then they've got bloody Yates, who's just an absolute thug, just going in, elbowing, kicking, doing whatever he can to people in the middle. He's kind of like their version of a Joe Linton. And then you've got some Dons that can actually play with the ball quite nicely in front of that, right? With Elanga, Morgan Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi. And then you've just got a gunman that doesn't really look like he can play with the ball very much, but seems to be able to smash it into the back of the net in Chris Wood, who got, I believe, a hat-trick for New Zealand during this international break. So good for my FPL team, but bad for my the team that I support in terms of him performing well. So I don't know how it's going to go. I think it's going to be a cagey one. I think they're going to be difficult to break down. I think it's going to be physical game. And that worries me a little bit because, I think Rice has got like a injured toe. It affected him during the Chelsea game. If he tries to play again, I don't want to see what Yates is going to try and do to my man's toe. Then you've got people like Calafiori who basically just coming back from injury. Timber who's just basically coming back from injury. Even Odegaard too. So, I mean, Partey, Havertz are going to have to be throwing elbows, mate. I need Saliba, Gabriel, Partey, Rice. Maybe not Rice, but Havertz really swinging it around. I need them to be physical. I need them to try and dominate. And then I need people like Saka, Martinelli, and Odegaard really to just play them off the park and just overdo it with quality. But yeah, I think it's going to be a cagey one. I honestly don't know which way it's going to go. Obviously, I'm going to back my team, but I'll go for a 1-0 win.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad shout. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a slog. This is a terrible game back from after international duty. Not because I think Forest are the best team in the world, but styles make fights, and the matchup on this is a rough one, especially after the international break. Not because I don't think you guys are physical, not because I don't think you guys can swing elbows and do the dark arts. We're talking about dark arts FC, right? With Arsenal, that's what everyone says. But I think it's more likely the state, the physical state and condition that some of your players are in coming into this. Like you mentioned, Rice with his toe, Odegaard's literally just come back from his recent injury, and I feel like he was kind of expedited a little bit because of the other injuries you had to get him onto the pitch at Chelsea and to play for as long as he did. Backline is normally super resolute, but like you said, Timber, Calafiori both been out injured recently as well. So it's going to be a big test. I'll say that because Nuno has turned Forest into 2024 Wolves that he used to have, where you knew it was going to be a low scoring game and you were going to have to just like out muscle them, and they were going to be super disciplined, and they had that little sprinkling of a little bit of stardust here and there. Jimenez and Ruben Neves and those guys that they used to have at Wolves, their current equivalent is Chris Wood, like you said up front, and Gibbs-White in behind, with flying wingers, Hudson-Odoi, Elanga, like you mentioned, and that really steely defence. I love that centre-back pairing, man. Murillo and Milenkovic, and they weren't bought for a lot of money either. It's really good recruitment from them. And Edu,
and
when
Sells in goal as well.
Forest will be looking. He's decent, yeah.
Sells in goal looks decent as well. I know. That's a weird one as well, because they've had some weird goalkeepers over the last few years with was it Keylor Navas for a bit, and then they had Matt Turner? They've had some mental goalkeeping decisions over the last couple of years, but Sells looks good.
Yeah, he's and I'll be honest, you make a good point. Like they had Navas, who was actually decent for them, but it was just a really weird.
It was a weird one.
It was one of those football manager, when you're in your 15th season type situation where people start going to all kind of random teams. But he was decent for them. But then they had like you said, Matt Turner. Vlachodimos or whatever his name is, the Greek goalie from Olympiacos, which I'm pretty sure was just like a bit of a like FFP.
Didn't they have Dean
kind of
Henderson
move
as
the
well?
money around type deal. They had Dean Henderson on loan, from United for a little period. And now they've got Sells, who I never really rated, and he had a little stint at Newcastle and he didn't look that good, but now he's come back in his early 30s, late 20s, and he looks like a proper keeper. So yeah, they've got a really resolute team, man. Like you said, also Ola Aina, who's really good on FPL, by the way. He's bombing forward, getting assists, getting goals, and he's always part of that back line that gets a lot of clean sheets. So bloody hell, mate, the more I'm talking about it, I think it's going to be it's going to be a battle. And I think it will be
fun stat for you.
Really hard.
Let me pull out one fun stat for you. Right, they've played 8 games this season where it's either been 1-0 or 1-1. 8 of their games this season have been 1-0 or 1-1, and they've been on the best side, like the positive side of most of those results. They've had a couple of games where it was like tense with like Brighton, I think 2-2. And then recently, like they pumped, West Ham 3-1 or whatever it is. They've had some more high-scoring games recently, but like the amount of 1-1s and 1-0s I'm seeing, it's mental. So I mean, given our defensive record and then our attacking record this season, where we can barely score a goal, I just feel like it's either a 1-1 or a 1-0 written all over it, innit?
Yeah, I think but they are coming. The only thing that gives me, other than the fact I think you're a better team than them, right? So you should win. If you look at just the last game they played as well, they did get battered at home by Newcastle. Yeah. And even though Newcastle are a bit of a like bogey team for them, I think, although I think last season they did a double. I think Chris Wood went up to St James's Park and banged a hat trick against them, which was hilarious. But I think Newcastle, they're capable of like pulling off a shock away at some of these grounds, which are more difficult.
And they were also coming off beating us, so I think they were on a bit of a high.
Yeah, and Newcastle probably one of the only teams that can go toe to toe with them physically. So
yes, exactly.
I think they could maybe outmuscle them with that midfield. But I think that you never know. Maybe they come into this game a little bit down. And the wind is out of their sails a little bit after taking that defeat at home to Newcastle. But regardless of that, I still think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I still expect you guys to win, and I'm going to be slightly more adventurous than 1-0 or 1-1. So I'm going to go for you guys to win 2-0. But I do think it's going to be like really tight. Like maybe you score a goal, early in the second half, and then it becomes really tense, and you nick one in the final 10 minutes or so to seal the deal. But I don't think it will be, there might be some tense moments as well where Raya has to pull some big saves and keep you in some games, which he's done plenty of times this season. But I think you'll do enough to get the win and lift the mood a bit. And, hopefully, the other results go in your favour and you can make up some ground on City and Liverpool. All right, so we've locked in our predictions. You've gone 1-0, right, Arsenal? And I've gone 2-0 Arsenal. So, all right, let's move on to Ipswich Town United then. Ruben Amorim's first game in charge. The Tractor Boys, Ipswich coming off a really big upset, 2-1 win at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium before the international break. If you saw that game, Johnson, I don't know if you did, but they completely deserved that. It wasn't like a smash and grab or anything. They outplayed Spurs.
They were better.
And they totally deserved it. Yeah, they totally deserved it. And I'll tell you what, that Liam Delap up front,
he's good, man.
An issue.
He's coming out of Man City Academy.
He's an issue.
Not, don't.
Yeah, he's an issue.
We can't underestimate my man because his dad used to just throw the ball really far. He's coming out of Man City Academy. He's by far their best player. So I expect Ipswich to go down, but I do not expect him to go down. I think a team like, I'm not going to say Bournemouth now because it looks like Evan Nilsson's looking good, but somebody that's just lost a big striker, he's a good person to look at, man. I mean, even at bloody Arsenal, I mean, I'm getting as desperate as saying, like, get me someone like him who can bloody just push people about and score. Like, that's how desperate I'm at. I went from Isak and Osherman to my man.
I don't even think that's desperate, man. I think that's just I like him a lot, man. I think he can go really, really far. The goals I've seen him score, they're not just like brute force target
No,
man,
yeah.
shoving people out the way type goals. Like, he scored some really techie finishes where he's like skinning players and slapping them in the side netting. He looks like a really, really competent modern striker where he's got
Yeah.
speed and power and he's finishing, and he looks like he's gone and done Harry Kane drill sessions. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
slapping
Yeah.
shots in the corners. So I know that's big praise because obviously he's nowhere near Kane in terms of his accolades or anything like that. Personally speaking, when it comes to scoring and leading a team into Champions League places, etc. But I like him, and I think he's a really good player. And I agree with you. I don't think he'll be at Ipswich for too long if they go down. I think someone else in the league will snap him up because he looks really handy. The rest of their team, I'm not
great.
I'm not like I'm not that. I haven't been that impressed by them. I have to be honest. I watched a couple of their games early on, and they had spells in matches where they looked okay, but they just seem to not bottle it, but they seem to crumble quite a lot and let the occasion get the better of them consistently week after week. And I know they've lost a couple of 2-0 leads here and there. So who knows? Maybe that Spurs game will be the turning point for them because it's a huge win, their first win of the season, which Spurs seem to be giving out to everyone because they lost to Crystal Palace as well for their first win. So it seems to be a habit they're getting in. But I think this is going to be a really, really tough game for Amorim to have as his first kind of game in charge. But I do think it's a game where if the team play competently and they get off to a fast start, I think you can take the wind out of their sails. And I think Ipswich are not a team where I believe they're going to be like Forest, for example, where we just talked about in the previous segment, where they're going to make it really tough and we're not going to get many chances. And it's going to be, a game where you have to be really clinical. I believe we'll get chances in this game. We'll get plenty of chances. And
especially if you compress them.
Yeah.
If you guys press them really well, they stink. They're the ones that weren't they the ones that Gary Neville was like, why the hell are you trying to play it out from the back? You guys stink. I think he said it about them and Southampton, right? Like, I know that it's more in their DNA with kind of like McKenna's style, but they just don't have the quality for it at the back, really. So I think if you guys press high intensity, which I think is kind of Amorim's like MO, I think that you'll get a lot of chances. So you're going to have a really, in my opinion, have a really off day to not score 2 goals, finishing wise.
I don't know about the 2 goals point. That's funny, but I think I agree with that overall assessment though. Like I don't think we've been that bad pressing wise in the first phase. I think we've won the ball back quite a few times in opposition teams' defensive third. Our like finishing has been a big sticking point. We're right up at the top in terms of like expected goals and big chances missed. So that's been a really big problem for us. So even if we play in a similar vein to kind of how we have been under Rude, 2 or 3 games that he had in charge, even the last couple against for Ten Hag, West Ham is a good example where we had so many chances we should have been out of sight. Then I think we'll win this game. But I do think we will obviously give up chances too. Like, I'm not naive. We're extremely likely to move to this 3-4-3, right? I don't expect you to have seen any of the training videos that have been going out.
No, I did.
In PR, but
I did.
Yeah, all signs are pointing towards Amorim kind of adopting the same game model he had for Sporting in the last couple of seasons with the 3 centre backs and the 4 in midfield with the 2 wingers and then 2 AMs and 1 striker, because that's kind of what it looked like they were practicing in training. So let's see how it goes, but I do expect that formation change, that tactic change, and probably some personnel changes will impact us in defence as well. So I do expect us to give up some chances, and I don't think it will be smooth sailing. But a question I do want to ask you, and then I'll kind of give my 2 cents afterwards, Do you think it's more important for Amorim to get a win in his first game now against Ipswich, or do you think it would still be okay if we drew or lost a game if we saw some sort of glimpse of style of play? Because that's always obviously been a big criticism for Ten Hag when he was United manager, was that we didn't see a style of play. So what do you think is more important for Amorim in this first game?
I think style of play. I think you guys have gone through the whole results over everything with Ten Hag, right? As much as I know you guys you had a style of play, you did, but it stank, right? As you've said many times, you had a style of play, it just was poor. At least on the last, let's say, 18 months, right? So from my point of view, I think Man United fans are more so than any other fan really driven by success, right? And just win. We don't care how you do it, just bloody win. But after this kind of last 18 months with Ten Hag, I feel like you guys have gone more of the Tottenham fan way of saying, actually, I don't care if you win anything, just play better. Because it's been so poor. So from my point of view, I think the pendulum has swung back to just, I want to see some nice football. But I still think there will be a tinge of that it's got to end up with something. And I would say they would be more willing to accept it if you were playing someone considered to be better. I know that Ipswich play decently good football and they've got players like Delap who can punish you. But I think the Ipswich name and the fact they're a promoted team, your fans will expect to have both, to play well and to win. And obviously all the PR around it, all of your fans, a lot of your fans are saying we're back, what is it? I'm ready to get hurt again, and all this kind of these jokes that you guys are making. I feel like as a result, you guys are gonna expect something. I know that you've been humbled by what has happened recently, but I still think that you've got that we've won it all mentality where you expect a lot from your managers immediately. So, especially with the training videos going around and everyone trying to break them down and use them to say why Amorim's so great, I will imagine that you will expect something good from him. So from my point of view, the only way you can get away with not winning the game and seeing improvement is if you see improvement, but you're one of your players just has an absolute stinker. Because then your fans will just say, "Oh, it's bloody Casemiro again. Oh, it's so and so again. He's made a hash of it, or he's put in a stinker." That Amorim can get away with, Like if Ugarte misplaces a pass and there's nothing that De Ligt or Onan or anyone else can do about it, and Delap just slaps onto the back of the net, I feel like Amorim will get away with that. But if it's a breakdown, if it's defensively you look stinky, or the style of play doesn't look good and you end up losing or drawing, I do think there will be some groans. I'm not going to say that people are going to beat Amorim out or anything crazy like that, but there will be some groans. So that's the only way I see him getting out of this if it's not a positive result, without the groans.
I hear you, man. I pretty much agree with your point. I think the reason why people were really hung up about this style of play thing, it wasn't even because I think United fans are snobs about wanting to see beautiful football. I think a lot of United fans under Sir Alex Ferguson accepted when we needed to change our style, accepted when we didn't play the most glamorous football because it was kind of a needs must. So I don't think it's there are a lot of teams out there that say the United way or the Arsenal way or the West Ham way or whatever. I don't believe in that. But I think what's happened is, like you said earlier, we had a really bad, illogical style of play before with Ten Hag, where it was obvious we were getting punished week in, week out. And even when we got wins, it was obvious that there was something broken with the model and it wasn't getting the best out of our players. And so when it went bad, it went all-time Hall of Fame stinky bad. 7-0, 4-0, etc. Humiliation settings. When it went well, we could get wins against big teams. Beaten City, we beat you a couple of times, we beat Liverpool a couple of times. We had big wins, beat Barcelona obviously in the Europa League. So there were times when it worked, but when it went wrong, it just went really wrong. And I think what we want from Amorim is someone to come in and have a stable style of play and a style of play that isn't going to feel so vulnerable. And I think that's the key, because a lot of people hid behind Ten Hag's no style of play, that United don't have a style of play. It was just lazy analysis. It was so lazy. It was, people were just coming to that conclusion because it didn't fit in with an idea they had of football. But the truth was, it was crap and it was broken. And a lot of us non-footballing people outside the industry could watch it and go, this doesn't make sense. It's not working. If we can work that out, that gives no confidence in your manager that's getting paid tens of millions of pounds to try and get success with your team. And some would argue, and like he argued till his last few, figurative breaths as United manager, I won trophies and all this kind of stuff. Great, you won a couple trophies, and we were happy for it, and we backed him all the way to the hill with those trophies. But it wasn't just success. We also got those humblings in the league. Last season we were abysmal. In the Champions League we were abysmal. So it was clearly not working. All signs pointing to it not working. This season, in the first 7 games or whatever he had, it wasn't working. So with Amorim, I think the key is have a stable style of play and, for God's sake, stick to it. Don't fold when you start getting pressed and say all kinds of rubbish, because then we don't have confidence that you have confidence in your style of play. So me seeing those videos, of course I'm buying in and drinking the Amorim Kool-Aid and going, yeah, look at my manager. He's still trying to, he's trying to do this. He's inspiring the players. The biggest thing I took from it was just joy that he was going with the same style and the same formation and game model that he'd been employing in Sporting. Because that shows that's something he really believes in, and that's what he wants to bring to United, and not try and say, United is a team of wingers and counter-attack and all this kind of stuff, because that's reductionary. That's not the truth. We had lots of styles of play, and we now will need to adopt his style of play because that's his vision, right? He can honour the club and the team in other ways, but if he believes this is the way to go forward, that's going to work, man, just stick to it, stick to your guns, and stick to your convictions with what you believe in. And like I said to you before, the other things are more important to me as well when it comes to the character of the manager, his intangibles, like the fact that he seems more personable, doesn't seem like a robot, he doesn't seem stiff, he's got a bit of charisma.
He doesn't seem to lie through his teeth constantly.
Like yeah.
I told you. I remember I told you this. I told you at the beginning. Eric Ten Hag, he might be a tactical genius, as Benny McCarthy was saying, but he was full of crap, man. Like in terms of his, his demeanor in front of the media, the fact that he just like not lied, but he just seemed to kind of omit the truth or completely switch things around. It doesn't go well, man. Like I know that you've got to be somewhere in between the radical honesty of a Mourinho or a Conte and just lying out or talking out your ass like Ten Hag for most of it. I know you can't be on either end of that spectrum, but like that was the thing about him that used to just make me believe, like, if you're Rashford, if you're one of these players that is relatively temperamental and you hear him just talking absolute fraff in the media constantly, like, what does it tell you about the man? Right. And it's very clear now that he was a poor communicator. And from my point of view, that's what is going to be the biggest thing here. I think he needs to be a pretty good tactician, but he needs to be an excellent man manager. And that is the key, right? If you look at the most successful managers you've had over the last, 10, 15 years, I think you could probably argue Oli did a pretty good job. Mourinho did a decently good job. And if you think about it, like, in my opinion, Oli was the best man manager, but he just wasn't good enough tactically. Right. And then you had people like Van Gaal who were really good tactically, but poor man managers. And then in the case of Jose Mourinho and like how he treated Schweinsteiger and all this other stuff, like, you had some poor man management. And I think you just need a guy that can just treat your players nicely. They are temperamental guys. You've got a lot of youngsters in that squad now as well. You need a young guy that's relatable, that's nice, that's smiley, that can get people on side and inspire them. And I feel like, not to drink the Kool-Aid myself, but I feel like he seems more of that ilk than Ten Hag did. So I think
No, he
that bodes
definitely
well
does.
for your team. And I think that will be probably the key to him sticking around.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. I think a lot of people go through our managerial history post Alex Ferguson and say, Gary Neville loves to do this. You've had this manager, you've had that one, you've had this one, you've had that one. It's never going to change. But I do see clear distinctions between all the managers we've had. And I don't
Yeah.
think we've had an Amorim yet. Now, while people compare Ten Hag before he joined United to Amorim in terms of their CVs, I'm talking about the manager, the character, right?
Yeah.
I think if you look at who we've had, Moyes is not like this.
No character.
Van Gaal most certainly is not like this. Prime Mourinho was like this, but when we got him, he wasn't prime Mourinho. He was more wise in the tooth, long in the tooth, a bit wiser, also a bit more jaded. So his man management skills had changed and he'd become a bit, harsher, as you saw with his treatment of Schweinsteiger. But also
they all had to deal with prime glazers too, right? Like,
yeah,
exactly, Amorim is not going to have to deal with prime glazer madness. Right, I saw this figure the other day that showed the amount of investment both in transfer fees and in other things like stadiums and so on. And you guys were like the lowest in terms of the amount invested into that team. It's mental. So, yeah, he's not going to have to deal with that. So hopefully he doesn't get as jaded as quickly. Because if I was Mourinho, it's like Conte at Spurs, right? Having to deal with Levy. It's Mourinho having to deal with the Glazers. Like, those guys don't last long. So he's younger, he's fresher, he hasn't had to deal with this madness. Maybe he'll do better as well with all the the footballing structure you guys have got.
Yeah, I mean that's an extra point for me. I agree with that as well. It's obviously he's under different management. I actually think Mourinho was kind of jaded before he even got to United anely, though.
Oh yeah,
through the experience at Madrid when everything crumbled, the Chelsea second stint with the physio and all that drama. Like he had gone through some things. So I think the Glazers being there was the cherry and icing on top that just tipped him over the edge, I think, which has kind of led him down where his kind of career's gone, since. And I love Mourinho. I still love him to this day, right? I think he's been our best manager post Fergie, but just generally as a character, I love him. I think he's, football needs characters like that. But yeah, he was the way he was. And then the next manager, Ollie, was the antidote. Like you said, I don't even know tactically if he was that poor. I just feel like he had the original United of Fergie DNA, and he was like, I'm not going to allow us to just sit back and be counter-attacking all the time. We're Man United. We have to go after them. And I feel like he knew he didn't have the players for it, but at some point, he said it on the overlap thing, we had to take the next step, and we had to just see where we were against these good teams playing open football. And he got thrown under the bus, I'll be perfectly honest with you, because the players weren't capable of doing it. But I don't think he was the long-term plan anyway. And then Ten Hag, I honestly feel like with that shootout, if we had got Pochettino at that time, Pochettino is a bit more Amorim-ish in terms of he's got charisma. He seems like, he's better with the players. When Chelsea fired him, all the players were upset. As much as they've been good under Enzo, I think they all really bought in and enjoyed Pochettino as a manager in his football. So Amorim's the first kind of manager we've had in this mold. Let's see how it goes. He's got the best setup that any of those managers have ever, had in terms of the footballing structure, the ownership model. He might have less money available to him, but I feel like that's because of the way that money's been mismanaged. But I think that's fine. I don't think we should use that as an excuse for him. And let's just see how he goes. But I agree with you. The most important thing is the man in management. It's the charisma. It's the intangible things that you need to be a successful manager that I feel like there are glimpses that he may have. So let's just see how it goes. Let's not get too giddy.
It'd also be good to see Man United become exciting again. Right? Like, Man United have historically been an exciting team to watch, right? In the same way that like Arsenal back in the day were like an exciting team to watch in terms of like the way that we used to build up, right? That was the greatest thing about Man United and Arsenal at that time. We were exciting teams to watch and you never knew what was going to happen. You could have some individual brilliance from players. You could have just some crazy team goals together, like hundreds of passes and then a beautiful finish at the end of it. And I think that's missing from Man United football, particularly over the last few years, right? It's not been, even under Ten Hag, even when you won those, the trophies, the most exciting game I can think of was just that mad game against Liverpool. Was it in the cup? Where like by the end of it, you had Bruno literally stood next to Onana just hoofing balls up. Like that was exciting because of how open it was. And I feel like Ten Hag, the style of play was not only, in my opinion, ineffective, but it was also not exciting, right? It would be exciting if you were the opposition fan because you'd think, what the hell are these lot doing? But as a Man United fan, you'd think, this is not good to watch. Like, yes, you had individual bits of brilliance still, like a Garnacho overhead kick and stuff, but when was the last time you can say, like, you put together a really, really nice team goal? Like, it doesn't happen that frequently for you guys, especially considering the fact that you are Man United and you should be doing that quite frequently. So I think that's another thing. And I think Amorim, from what I see of him at Sporting, he's bloody exciting to watch in terms of that play, right? That match against Man City, for example, it's exciting, man. And if you can replicate that, but with like a higher caliber of player in terms of like starting quality, it's going to be good for the Premier League. And now with the news that bloody Pep's sticking around, I need another manager that can beat him. Because I'm getting sick of that bloody Spanish Carl Pilkington knocking about all the time. Just leave, man.
Go on, Carl Pilkington's travel show. Remember when he goes to China and he's eating all kind of mad stuff? It's one of my favourite episodes of that show. Carl Pilkington, that's class. But yeah, no, I agree, man. Let's see. For my sake, I hope he and United fans' sake, I hope he adds to the rich kind of tapestry of managers that we have in the league. And like you said, we need. It's a group effort. Which one of us manages to win the league and take it off City, I don't know at this point. And I'll obviously be upset if it's Liverpool, or I'll be upset if it's Arsenal, and I'll be basically upset if it's anyone not United. But I do think it's like that final boss on the classic video game where you need to just like, you might need to get your mates in to come in and everyone just like tag team them and to get them over the line, because otherwise it's just not, you're coming up against a juggernaut. But anyway, yeah,
exactly.
This game I think it's
like the Royal
game.
Rumble. It's like the Royal Rumble, and everyone's teaming up to get Big Show out. That's what we've got to do, and then we'll get back to fighting each other afterwards. But let's just get Big Show and his bald head out.
Yeah, I remember those Royal Rumbles. Those are class, man. You just see every fighter in there just all gang up to try and throw Big Show over the ropes and then come back to fighting each other. But no, I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be interesting. I think it will be exciting. I think Ipswich will give up loads of chances. We'll give up some chances. And it will come down to who has the individual bit of quality, which we should come out on top in that case. But obviously Ipswich's recent game against Spurs shows that it's not always going to be the case. But yeah, I'm going to go for United to win 3-1. But I mean, as with all of my predictions this season, it could go anyway. What about you, Johns? What do you think the game will look like in terms of the scoreline?
I'm going to go with Man United 2-0. I think you're going to have a bit of a new manager bounce. I think you guys were pretty decent under Ruud van Nistelrooy. I think you've got like some guys coming back in terms of Yoro, Luke Shaw. I don't know if they'll necessarily start, but you've got guys coming back. You've had a rest in terms of international football, and you've got the high of Amorim coming back in, and yeah, as much as like we talked about Delap and that, I don't think there's much in this Ipswich team outside of him. So yeah, there could be some like individual kind of brilliance from him, but I think you guys will have enough to maybe come away with a 2-0 win.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only reason why I've gone for a slightly higher scoring game is just because I don't know if we'll come out with a clean sheet. I think Amorim will be forgiven for conceding a goal or two if we come out with the W, considering we're changing formation and game model and all that kind of stuff. It might not go flawlessly. But you could be right. Ipswich are not a guarantee to convert their chances either, as well as Delap's playing. They haven't really got too much of a threat outside of him. Maybe Amari Hutchinson, but they haven't got
Smodjic.
too much more going forward.
Smodic?
Smodjic's decent as well. Yeah,
he's
the Irish
okay. He's
lad
got a
from
few
Football
goals
Bank.
this year already, so maybe him. But then they've got dons like Morsey in there who are just like Sunday league footballers, basically. So you never know what's going to happen.
Ipswich are a funny team, man. You've got to give respect to McKenna getting them up, because I know this season they've bought a few players, but the double promotion they did basically with the same team they had in League One. So shout out to them.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up that preview segment there. Let's get into the special segment of the week. There's been quite a lot going on outside of United, outside of Arsenal, in this international break. We'll start off with the big controversy that kind of kicked off the beginning of the international break, and that was the controversy around David Coote. To set the scene, if you've been living under a rock over the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's a Premier League referee. He had a series of unfortunate videos leak via the Sun, Daily Mail, and other British newspapers. The first two showing him speaking into the camera with another one of his mates or boyfriend or whatever. I don't know quite their relationship, where he basically says all Liverpool are scum, or we don't like them, etc. And Jurgen Klopp is a German C word. Then he proceeds to take another video. He's in another recorded video where he's saying, please do not share this video with anyone. It cannot get out, etc. He was suspended almost immediately after that. And then midway through the international break, another video comes out allegedly of David Coote sniffing a white substance off the table, recording himself. And apparently this was taken just after the Euro 2024 quarterfinal between Germany and Spain, of which he was an assistant VAR and made a very dubious penalty call, not giving a penalty to Germany when Cucurella obviously gave away a penalty. So, yeah, UEFA are now investigating him as well. There's been this whole discourse about whether or not he should be fired and lose his job, whether or not we should give him a second chance and not condemn him. What do you think, Johns, first of all, before I share my thoughts and opinions on this? Do you think he should lose his job, or do you think the suspension and then bringing him back in slowly is the right approach?
I think he should lose his job and never be allowed to referee again. I think it's pretty simple. If you do anything else in sport where you deliberately affect the result of a game in essentially a negative way, an unfair way, you get banned for a long time. And I'm going to give you an example. Think about all the furore around betting and gambling and the amount of bans that have been given out to players for that reason, right? Because and in some cases, or in most cases, they're not betting against themselves. They're betting literally on, random other results in the league, and they get, a year ban, or they get 9 months ban, and they get massive fines and whatever else, right? It's mental, right? They're affecting the outcome of a game. Then you think about the fact that he is supposed to be enforcing games, and he is supposed to be kind of the purveyor of justice, if you think about it, right? He's the judge, the jury, and the executioner in many senses of the word when it comes to football and individual football matches. If there's any inkling that he might have a bias against a country or a team, that man can never touch the pitch again. I'm sorry, right? It's, in my opinion, it entirely calls into question the integrity of him and the institution that he represents. So, he says the German C word, and then we pull it up that he's doing cocaine and making decisions that go against Germany, allegedly. And he's making decisions against Germany, right? Like, I don't care if it's true or not that he's anti-German or biased this or biased that. That's enough for him to lose his job. I'm sorry to say it, right? So, I honestly think we should have a harsher stance on a lot of these things. And I don't think you can ever recover from this, right? Like, can you imagine all the football fans that are going to be chanting at him if he ever came back? They're going to basically have to handle him with kid gloves for the rest of his career. He'll never be allowed to referee a Liverpool match ever again, even if he does come back, right? He'll never be allowed to get anywhere near a match that may affect Liverpool massively. Let's say Liverpool are in a title race with Man City. They're not going to want to put him on Man City games either. So what's the point? You're just going to have to manage around him. And I'm sorry, he's not God's gift to refereeing for you to do that, right? Go and find someone else. You've got plenty of other grassroots referees. It's very clear that your standard or expectations for referees is very low anyway. You can literally pick someone off the street, give them 2 weeks of training, and they're probably as good as some of the referees you put out today. So, no, I understand, should a person lose their career for it? That's a totally fine argument to make if they've, been caught swearing, or if they get caught speeding or something like that. Fine, go ahead. But if they do something serious like this, or they're caught drunk driving, or they're caught doing something mental like abusing drugs or showing bias against or towards a team, I'm sorry, you're out. Can you imagine if it was the other way around, right? Like if they found a player on tape saying that, he's intentionally affected games, or he hates whatever, and he's caught doing substances, the outrage would be massive. So no, don't ever let him referee again. He should lose his job, go and do something else. The game's the game, right? This is £1 billion plus league. This ain't Sunday league. This ain't Bible study. We don't have to give everyone a second chance. I'm sorry. So off you go, Coote, never to be seen again in the Premier League.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I think not for coming to a conclusion, or not when it comes to coming to a conclusion with, what should happen to him and his career in the Premier League. I agree. I think after everything in totality, he cannot referee again in this country. Maybe he can go and referee again in Qatar or somewhere else, and restart his career if that's something that he's determined to do with the rest of his life. But I think in the Premier League in England, there's no way he can continue. I think if you break things down in isolation, I think the first few videos are definitely suspension worthy. They are definitely investigation worthy to understand what is the context behind them. And he should definitely get, the maximum punishment within the jurisdiction of his role, because of the severity of what you just said. The fact that bias and now, affecting outcomes of games comes into question every single time he could play or could officiate a Liverpool game, and not only a Liverpool game, but rivals of Liverpool, if they were coming, in a title charge against Liverpool, or anything where Liverpool's stakes are raised by another team, he would automatically become a massive question mark, and rule himself out basically of being anyway involved with those games. So it's super, super serious. I think the third video, which we have to be careful around the allegedly and all that kind of stuff, where he's sniffing some white powder or something like that. If that is found to be an illegal substance, he should face the same punishment any of the rest of us would get if we were found to have recorded ourselves taking an illegal substance or breaking any law, which would generally be we would lose our job, right? If you or I were to do that, and our company was to find out, I'm pretty sure we would lose our job, no questions asked. It wouldn't be a case of disciplinary this or disciplinary that, or suspension this or suspension that. We would lose our jobs. Generally, that is the stakes we're all playing with in all of our jobs. And I don't think a referee should be held to a different standard or be given any sort of more of a bly than the rest of us. So I think when you combine all this stuff together, I can't see a world where he's able to continue refereeing in the Premier League and refereeing in this country. I think the only thing I will say is David Coote's behaviour is very much representative of a lot of people in the UK. I'll be honest with you. We'll be lying if we said we didn't know acquaintances or have heard stories about people doing some of the things David Coote has done. So I don't think some of the pile-on that's I've seen happen to him is that great. I think a lot of people probably need to look in the mirror if they're like going absolutely in on him for doing any one of those things, because I'm sure a lot of them have done it themselves. But I do think if you look at it with the cold light of day in terms of his career, there's no coming back. There's no coming back from doing all these things and having evidence and proof. It's one thing if you've done those things and you're not recording it, not sharing it with people, and it's his word against our word. Maybe he could weasel his way out of it. Maybe he could lie his way out of it. Maybe he could get around it because there's no evidence or proof. But there is proof and there is evidence, and there's no coming back. So I think I hope this is resolved and dealt with swiftly. I don't understand why the PGMOL will drag this out longer. I can't see how complicated this investigation could be, but let's see how it goes. But I think I agree with you overall. I think there's no coming back from it, and we've got to try and not make the PGMOL and the state of refereeing all about David Coote. This is just a crazy incident, a set of incidents that have come about.
And that's why the PGMOL has to take swift and, in my opinion, decisive action, right? They can't have people banging on about it. And if they bring Coote back, it will just show me that it's not about the quality of their refereeing. It's not about their customer in the fans, in the clubs, in the Premier League. It's about them, and they're protecting their own. And we've already seen enough of that from the referees. We've already heard, can't remember who it was, saying he didn't want to correct his mate. That's not how it should be, right? It's the same complaint we have a lot about a lot of government organisations as well, right? Don't protect your own. Hold yourself to the same quality standards that your customer holds you to, right? In the case of the police, it's us, the customer, as ordinary citizens of the world or of the country. Same goes for PGMOL. So, I get the whole point about he's not the only person to do those things. But I also think, just because many people do those things doesn't necessarily mean that it should be widely accepted, right? And if it was, then it would be legally okay to do. And I think everybody else that does those things should understand, and probably does understand, that what they're doing could get them in trouble if they're found to do it. So they do it discreetly. They do it in ways that don't get recorded and put on the internet, especially if you're in a very high profile job. Like if you're working in an industry where, you're not a celebrity, you're not going to be recorded. And even if you were, it's not going to be put onto social media, then fine. But if you're in a very high profile industry where you're paid in line with, the high profile nature of your job, it's assumed that you're either going to be extremely discreet about any things that you may be doing that may be considered to be illegal or whatever else. But also, you understand that if you get caught doing any of those things, you are done for, right? It's not your God-given right to be a referee, unfortunately, right? And if I was caught on camera saying negative or trade secret type things about my company, they would fire me. It would not be a suspension. I would be fired. If I was found to be doing something illegal that again brought my company into disrepute, I would be fired. And I don't work in a high profile industry. I can tell you that much for free. So David Coote would be held to that standard or higher, right? So from my point of view, there's no coming back from that. And if I see him come back from it, I will have lost faith even more in the PGMOL. And that's right now, honestly, there's not a lot of faith left. So I might get into the negatives.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are in that state at the moment, and there's a wider question that we can get into in another pod about the general state of the PGMOL, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities throughout the season to get into that. Let's get on to the next part of the special segment, which is going to be around Rodrigo Bentancur's racism ban / fine that he's been given this week. So yeah, more positive news to get through in ironic air quotes. So yeah, if again you haven't been up to speed on this incident, I think it happened. Did it happen? It happened kind of in pre-season or in the early part of the season this year. Rodrigo Bentancur was speaking to a Uruguayan journalist, and they were discussing, and the topic moved to Son Heung-Min at some point, and the journalist referred to him as the Korean, going very much down the Pep Guardiola lexicon of descriptive words to describe Son. And then Bentancur said, or replied when asked if he could get a shirt signed by Son, or I could get it signed by his cousin. They all look alike, was I think somewhere near the words he used, inferring that all Koreans look the same or look similar. He was charged with an aggravated breach of using racially insensitive and offensive language based on ethnicity and, in this case, nationality as well. And he's been given a 7-match ban and a £100,000 fine by the FA. So to go into a little bit more detail around this, because I've seen a lot of furore in the kind of football content creator world and also the media around this ban and the fine. An aggravated breach by FA law comes in to incur a minimum of a 6-match ban to a maximum of a 12-match ban range. So Rodrigo Bentancur getting a 7-match ban and a £100,000 fine is very much on the low scale, and it's been dealt with to try and make an example of Bentancur. And what I heard and listened to the reasoning behind it was not only because of the language he used in that interview, but also his defense, or should I say non-defense, where he said when he was asked that he was apologizing on behalf of the journalist for the journalist's reaction and not necessarily for the language he used, which the FA took into consideration as part of the reasoning why he was going to get a 7-match ban and a £100,000 fine. £100,000 fine, sorry, £100 would be decent actually. So let's get into this, John. So a lot of people are saying it's too severe. A lot of rightly kick it out, and a lot of the DEI kind of organisations around sport and football are saying that they're happy with this judgment. What do you make of it?
I don't know what to make of it. Like, I mean, obviously there's a part of me that thinks, it's not severe enough, right? And that's maybe the more visceral reaction, because it is a slur that could theoretically apply to me, and I've heard said about me before. So that's kind of the visceral, personal part. I'll try and get rid of that part, though, and try and talk about it objectively. I think, in general, the Premier League has always had a problem with this kind of behaviour, this kind of language, and in my opinion, they've almost always undercooked it when it came to punishments or even acknowledging it. I felt like for a very long time, for decades on decades, they barely did anything about it. It seemed almost like slap on the wrists, and in a lot of cases, it depended on who it was that did the thing, or said whatever it was, seemed to get away with it depending on what things have happened. We've heard plenty of stories before about Suarez, John Terry, all of these different things that have happened in the past. And in my opinion, were almost never punished fairly, in my opinion, or severely enough. So from the point of view of, it's nice to see that they're actually starting to take it a bit more seriously. I feel like from what I've seen, this is maybe one of the more severe bans that I've seen in terms of the amount of games he'll be suspended by, but don't quote me on that. There might be, other ones that I haven't seen, or I'm just misremembering, that have been more severe. But I do think that it makes a tangible impact on him and on Tottenham, right? In terms of, he's one of their main midfielders. 7 games is, near enough 20% of the season. And that has a tangible impact on them, right? And how well they can play. And from my point of view, that's the key. You need to have a significant impact on the player and the team that employs the player. Because at the end of the day, the player's own behaviour, in some cases, he might just deny it and say, I didn't do anything wrong. Until you hit him where it hurts, and in this case, it's his employer, or his ability to play, I don't know if he will necessarily accept the fact that he's done something wrong, right? So I think punishment is important. And I know some people will say, oh, it's free speech and, we can't punish free speech and all this other stuff. He's not being put in prison, just to be very clear. I'm not saying that the government should lock him up for what he said, right? But he is employed, right? And he is saying something against one of, I'm gonna be honest, his team's probably biggest moneymaker, right? Think about how many South Korean fans come to London to watch Tottenham. The amount of South Korean fans that are probably watching every Tottenham game, that are buying shirts. He's probably their biggest earner, right, in terms of Tottenham Football Club, right? So for a player in his own team to say that about him, I do think that should affect his livelihood. I do think that it should affect him, right? And again, he's not being put in prison, so I'm not saying that he should be locked up for what he said. But from my point of view, as I was saying, I do think it is nice to see finally that there is being some punishment handed out for this. So for all the fans that are, the Tottenham fans particularly in most cases are saying, oh, but other players didn't get this, this fine. What about Enzo and blah, 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 and blah. I'm not making the argument that like everyone should get off with it. And I think that Enzo should be punished, fairly as well. I think other players should get punished for what they said too. I'm not saying that he should be the only one. So I understand, if they're going to cry about fairness. But from my point of view, if you look at it, this is the right decision to be made. And everyone did that to me with Rice, right? And Saliba's red card and all this other stuff. They always said to me, oh, forget about what happened in the next game after that, where the exact same thing happened, but it wasn't punished fairly. What you guys did, you deserved it. So let's do it back to you. How do you like it? Yes, Enzo hasn't been, punished fairly. Other people haven't been punished fairly. Pep didn't get punished fairly necessarily for his comments about Hwang, right? I don't care. He made a mistake. We're only looking at him. We're only talking about him. 7-match ban, 100K. So I think those are my overall thoughts on it. I think I'd like to see. I don't want stupid language like this to be heard, right? I think if they want to go, if you want to play in the Premier League, you have to be able to adhere to the standards of the Premier League as a company, the general standards of society in terms of what is considered to be offensive to say. And I don't think you should be shocked if you end up, in trouble for it. So you can't have it both ways, right? You can't take advantage of one of the best and highest paid leagues in the world, but also try and get away with things that you think are okay in your own country, but you just, but are not okay here. You can't have it both ways, right? So I've babbled for a long enough time, but I think that kind of clarifies my thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. It's been an eye-opening couple of days, I have to be honest, around this topic. I've been really encouraged by this ban and the punishment that's been dealt out. I think it's shown the FA mean business, and they not only have been doing performative stuff when they've been, talking about inclusion and all this kind of stuff with the national team, and a lot of the rhetoric that Gareth Southgate's come out with and kind of been praised for being a great ambassador for England. I think it rings true to a lot of the things that we've seen and heard from Southgate and other people at the FA when you see this incident being dealt with the way it has. I think there are a couple of things that are really important to remember when you start doing whataboutery when it comes to this situation and try and compare it and conflate it with other incidents. I've heard the Enzo one being brought up loads. I totally agree with you. I don't think Enzo should get a punishment lighter than this. I think he should be treated in a very similar fashion. The key thing to bear in mind, though, and it's getting into the weeds, but the FA can hand out this punishment because Bentancur was not on international duty, and he was at that point an ambassador for Tottenham Hotspur, who play in the Premier League, and the FA are the Football Association of the Premier League in the UK. So it falls within their jurisdiction to come up with this punishment. When Enzo was singing the inappropriate song and the racist song that he was singing on that bus after Argentina had won the Copa America, that was a CONMEBOL and Argentinian FA issue for them to handle. There's nothing the FA can do. He'd been released to Argentina to go and play for his national team, and when players are released, they cease being governed by their club team. They are now they're now the problem of their national team and their continental federation to handle. So the fact that CONMEBOL, FIFA, and Argentina are not dealing with Enzo is reflective of how those organizations deal with these matters. And we've seen it when incidents happen in Italy, Spain, or other countries where, black and ethnic minority players have suffered abuse. We see how they treat them. We see how light the punishment is. We see how menial, those incidents are looked at. And so you can't compare them. Even though you can say Enzo should get a similar ban, there is a difference in how they're being managed and how they're being, dealt with, because there are different organizations that are leading and, having to investigate the incidents. So that is the reason why. So when people say, this isn't worse than Enzo, or why doesn't Enzo get it? You have to look at it as a separate situation. The same way, I'll give you an example. We have to look at handball differently in the Premier League, and we have to look at it differently when we play in Europe. How many times have we come on the pod and moaned because we've had a penalty given away for a handball in Europe, when we know in the Premier League that doesn't get given? Because they've got different laws, they've got different rules, and they're being refereed different ways. And these incidents are being dealt with with that same separation. So that's the reason why Bentancur has got dealt with in the way he has. That's the reason why Enzo is still being investigated by UEFA not UEFA, sorry, CONMEBOL and FIFA and Argentinian FA. And they're separate incidents completely. And I will say, when Evra had his situation with Suarez, I'm pretty sure Suarez got an 8-match ban for it, and a hefty fine. I'm pretty sure that John Terry, when he used his racial language to Anton Ferdinand, even though he was found not guilty in the public courts, I'm pretty sure he was given a 6-match ban or something similar. This is standard procedure. And the fact that Bentancur got the 7-match ban and the £100,000 fine should be treated as it being a standard outcome if you use racist language or xenophobic language, even if you're using it in jest, as a joke, even if it's towards your teammate, even if Son accepts your apology. Because it's not only about Son, it's about the whole, all of the Korean fans, all of the East and Southeast Asian fans that are watching and supporting the Premier League being offended by it. Some were, some weren't. That's just the simple case. I'll give another example, Johns, because we were talking about it separately. A show that we watch regularly, The Big Six, one of our favourite shows on, content creators. Love all those guys. They do a great job. It's one of the best football shows out there. There was like a segment where, in fact, they were talking about David Coote and German C word and how it was xenophobic and all that kind of stuff, and pretty much reiterated, I think, a lot of what we agree with, Johns. And then later in the episode, there was like a jokey segment where Big Steve was kind of making fun of Tottenham, and then he described the South Korean fans that often go to the training ground as being North Koreans, and then he called Son Heung-Min or whatever, and missaid his name in kind of a jokey way, but kind of downplaying, I guess, Son and his importance to Tottenham. So I reached out to him, and fair play to him. He apologised and said it was just a joke, and he genuinely didn't know Son's name. And I took the piss out of him and said he should know Son's name because Son's been packing them out for years, and he needs to learn it. But there are ways that people speak and talk about East and Southeast Asians in football, and often people get away with it. Now, I'm not saying Big Steve's racist or anything like that. I've said it to him as well. But I'm saying this kind of language, you mentioned it, Pep with the Korean. I think Hwang got called Jackie Chan or something like that in a preseason game.
Match.
You've got incident. Yeah, you see these incidents happen all the time. Son's the most racially abused player in the Premier League. I saw some stats about it. He gets the most racial abuse after games more than any other player. And yet, these incidents kind of, when it comes to East and Southeast Asians, often get overlooked. I think the last thing to talk about on this incident, Tottenham have appealed the ban. Which, I'm sorry, that's just outrageous, right? Because they are the one entity involved in this that should completely stay impartial and neutral, because it's two of their own players. And they've basically taken a side now by trying to appeal this 7-match ban and £100,000 fine. And almost, they're basically kind of saying it should be allowed in a certain way, to speak in that way, and it shouldn't be punished to that severity. So yeah, man, if we did like donkey of the day or kind of, donut of the week or whatever, Tottenham Hotspur would have to get it, because you can't, on one hand, condemn racist fans that abuse Son regularly and then come out and try and defend Rodrigo Bentancur's racist language against Son. Which one are you? You can't play both sides. So yeah, Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, you stink, mate.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think one of the things that is annoying me about all of this is, like, I've seen also some people talk about, if Son's okay with it or if they've made up, then why does anyone else need to get involved? And I'm just like, you think Son is the only Korean or East Asian, Southeast Asian that has been objected to the same kind of language? You are not. We have to remember that football players are examples to the rest of the world. They're examples to a lot of young, impressionable people. And just because Son is okay with it, good on him, right? Like, I don't think he's okay with it necessarily, but I think obviously as the captain of Tottenham, who wants his player, who knows this guy well, he probably is going to go and say, you know what, fair enough, apologise to me, let's make up and let's keep on going, right? Because he's a good guy. It's clear that Son is a nice guy. He is the captain of Tottenham for a reason, right? But at the same time, we have to remember that there are plenty of fans out there. There are plenty of other people that may be thinking of saying the same kind of thing, that need to understand that there are consequences, right? And we can't have Son speak for the entire East Asian, Southeast Asian community or Korean community, and just because he's a really nice guy, let everything go. So, that might also be another reason why Tottenham come out and appeal it, is because, Son as the captain says, you know what, I want my player back or whatever else, or they feel like if he's accepted the apology, then why do we need a 7-match ban? And that's just me speculating, right? But that may be part of it, because in my opinion, if Son is not okay with it, or if Son goes out and says, you know what, I'm happy with that 7-match ban, or, the 100k fine is deserved, I don't think Tottenham do go and appeal that, right? I don't think Tottenham will go against their captain to go and try and appeal that, because I think they would be putting into trouble their relationship with him. But obviously he's in a position where he's, pressured. So I have a feeling that could be part of the reason why they may be looking into the appeal. And again, that's just all speculation, but just thinking through it in my head logically, that probably is, in my opinion, what the case is. So I think that is part of it, but I think that does not excuse anything. I think that still stinks to the high heavens, and I think they should just let it go, right? They should count their lucky stars that it wasn't more, and they should move on. They got bigger things to focus on. They've just lost to Ipswich. They're stinking it up in the league. They're just about on the first page of the Premier League table. Focus on going and winning the next game. Don't focus on this. Take the punishment that you've deserved and move on, right? And overall, it's been a terrible couple of weeks in terms of the sentiment of news. But I don't think this is the right thing for people to try and hang their hat on and try and use as an example. There are plenty of other things that you can go and complain about where you probably have a good case for it, but this is not one of those.
Yeah. And last thing before we wrap up, we call for more severe bans for incidents of racism and abuse in football. Now we've got one. Let's not question it. Let's not think it's harsh. Let's not try and then start playing devil's advocate because it's not happening to our, identity group or whatever, like put yourself in another group's shoes. Would you say the same thing? When those things happened with Enzo, when things have happened to Lukaku in Italy and Vinicius Jr. in Spain and to Sterling even in England, or whoever, we all in unison say we need to have more severe punishment. We need to see people take it seriously. So the FA have taken it seriously. Let's just understand that even though you may not be offended by that, and even myself, I'm not majorly offended by what Bentancur said, but I understand the importance of treating this very, very carefully and respecting that there were a lot of people that are from our ethnic group that would be offended by that language. And it's not about my personal opinion, like it's not about Son's personal opinion. It's about a wider perspective. And it's the same, I think there was an incident with Garnacho where he got into hot water because he used a gorilla emoji to describe Onana being strong after saving a penalty. And Onana said, I'm not offended by it, so we should just move on. Onana's not the only black person in the world. Just because he wasn't offended by it doesn't mean that we can't treat it seriously. So you need to treat these issues seriously, and Bentancur needs to learn from this, and everyone, I think, needs to take a moment and learn from this, and understand what is acceptable to say, especially going back to even the Coote thing on camera. If you want to make your little jokey jokes between your mates in a WhatsApp group, and that doesn't go out, people are free to speak however they want within the confines of their own space. But when you do things in public, be ready for a public reaction, especially if you're going to say something controversial or potentially offensive. So well done, the FA. We've absolutely slammed the PGMOL in the previous segment, and we often give them some, the FA and the governing body some grief. But I actually think they deserve an applause and a pat on the back for this, because they've dealt with it well, and I think we should all appreciate the direction that we're going in with dealing with these issues. Let's wrap up the pod here, John. Let's quickly have a quick chat over the predictions. I'm going to keep it quick because it's still dire for me. I'm on 12, you're on 24. I think this week we haven't got a huge opportunity for me to drag myself back into to make this competitive, but hopefully I get some correct scores, and then we can make this interesting going forward, because otherwise I feel like this is just this is a procession basically at the end of every pod. But all right, let's leave it here, John. It's a great pod, man. Let's hope that both of our teams get the dub this weekend, and we'll speak to you all next week. Take care, guys.
Cheers, Ant. Cheers, everyone.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.